Welcome to this explainer. We usually see the end result of charity, right? The food handed out, the wells dug, the communities being rebuilt. But today, we're doing something a little different. We are unpacking the actual machinery behind all that. We're going to look at a dense, administrative procurement dossier to reveal the absolute strategic brilliance of humanitarian supply chains. Because make no mistake, handing out aid isn't just about good intentions. It's a massive, rigorous, logistical operation where a single slip-up can literally cost lives, not to mention millions in donor funds. So let's dive right into it.
Okay, picture this. You need to buy exactly 750 healthy female Sokoto Red goats. You're in Nigeria, you're under immense pressure, and you have some incredibly strict donor rules breathing down your neck. Well, that's exactly the highly specific challenge Action Against Hunger faced back in mid-2018. Just imagine the sheer volume of bleeding, right? The crazy transport logistics, the pressure of a super tight deadline, and notice how specific that parameter is. They couldn't just buy any random goat off the side of the road. It absolutely had to be the exact Sokoto Red breed because they're known for their resilience. So how on earth do you ensure you get the exact right livestock at the exact right price without fraud or delays completely derailing the mission?
To see exactly how they pulled this off, we'll follow a quick four-step agenda. 1. The Humanitarian Procurement Challenge. 2. Evaluating the 11 suppliers. 3. The Dual Supplier Strategy. And 4. Value for money achieved.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the Humanitarian Procurement Challenge.
The objective here was crystal clear. They needed to deliver high-value livelihood assets quickly, ethically, and safely, all while protecting donor funds and supporting local markets. This wasn't a simple trip to the local market. It was a complete tightrope walk. Think about it. Balancing a positive local economic impact while aggressively protecting donor funds is incredibly tricky. If an organization just dumps foreign money into a fragile local market without extreme care, they can actually trigger rampant inflation. They'd completely price out the very people they are trying to help. So they had to inject capital into the local economy without disrupting it, and absolutely zero compromises on the quality of the assets.
So the mission requirements for dossier NG-DA 02656 were mapped out with absolute precision. Obviously, the 750 female Sokoto Red goats. But crucially, they also had to provide associated goat feed, specifically groundnut leaves and husks. Why is the feed such a big deal? Well, when livestock arrive in a highly stressed environment, a sudden diet change or a lack of immediate food means those goats could literally starve or get sick the second they arrive. That defeats the whole purpose of the aid. Plus, they required delivery in 3 distinct batches of 250 goats to the Nangere local government area. Breaking it down into batches? Absolute masterstroke. It totally prevents overwhelming the local infrastructure and the community all at once. Every single step had to follow the rulebook.
And to do this entirely by the book, the team used something called a negotiated procedure via an RFQ, or request for quotation. Now let's just break that down real quick. An RFQ is not just shooting off a quick email asking a vendor for a price. No way. It is a highly structured, legally binding framework. It essentially forces local suppliers to formally prove their worth, their capacity, and their legitimacy on paper before a single dime is ever spent. It lays out the strict rules of engagement right from day one. We're talking total transparency, fairness, and creating an ironclad paper trail that can stand up to the most intense donor audits imaginable.
Moving right along to Section 2, evaluating the 11 suppliers.
Successful aid requires some serious disciplined patience. On July 2nd, 2018, the RFQ was advertised locally in Podiscum. They gave suppliers nearly 3 weeks, until July 20th, to submit their offers. And then, finally, on August 9th, they formally evaluated the 11 competing suppliers. Now, in a crisis zone, a timeline of over a month from advertisement to evaluation, that can feel like an absolute eternity. You just want to act fast. But rushing is exactly how fraud sneaks in. It's how unqualified vendors slip through the cracks, and ultimately, how missions fail. This methodical discipline shows exactly why waiting to evaluate properly is just so critical.
Notice how they actually judged these suppliers. A lot of people think procurement is just about finding the cheapest option, right? Actually, no. Suppliers were heavily scrutinized across some seriously strict criteria. Technical compliance meant goat and feed samples had to be physically verified by experts. Another huge requirement? A firm commitment to use the Nangere and Podiscum markets so the economic boost actually stayed local. Price only mattered if you were already fully compliant with all the other rules. And then there's reliability. In a conflict-affected zone, proving you are reliable is incredibly tough. Vendors literally had to provide independently verified references to even get their foot in the door.
So, out of 11 contenders, a company named Technodynamic Ltd won out. And honestly, kudos to them because they hit every single mark on that demanding matrix. They had the lowest fully compliant bid, the live goat and feed samples were officially approved by the sector manager, they committed to purely local sourcing. But the real kicker was that their reliability was proven to independent third parties. Unity Bank, the Federal College of Education in Potiskum, and the Federal University Gashua all vouched for their quality and timeliness. Passing a rigorous background check with a bank and 2 universities, I mean, that is basically the gold standard of local trust.
Factoring in an explicit exchange rate of 350 naira to the dollar at the time, Technodynamic's winning bid came out to exactly $32,125.71. Doing a little quick mental math here, that breaks down to roughly $42 per goat. And remember, that incredibly includes the associated feed and the super complex transport logistics. So they had their winner, and the price was fantastic, but there was one massive red flag hiding just beneath the surface.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, the dual supplier strategy.
So, here's the dilemma. What happens when your absolute best option on paper is a total stranger in practice? Yes, Technodynamic offered the best price and passed the technical checks, but they were a first-time vendor. They had 0 prior contractual history with Action Against Hunger. In a high-stakes, high-pressure environment like this, relying entirely on a first-timer exposes the whole program and all those donor funds to catastrophic disruption. If they fail to deliver those goats, the mission fails, period.
To safeguard delivery continuity against this risk, they pulled off a brilliant dual supplier structure. Honestly, think of it like a meticulously negotiated insurance policy. They contracted Technodynamic as the main supplier, securing that lowest price. But at the exact same time, they locked in a backup supplier, Burrito Masu Standard Vision Limited, under a framework contract. This framework backup acted as their break glass in case of emergency option. It would only ever be activated if the main supplier failed. It is just a textbook, masterful example of proactive risk management.
And to absolutely guarantee donor compliance and accountability, both of these contracts featured some fierce technical safeguards. We are talking truly ironclad rules here. If a goat died in transit, or even right upon delivery, there was a 100% replacement obligation at the supplier's sole cost. Just take a second to think about that. That rule alone immediately weeds out the scammers, because no fraudulent company is going to agree to replace dead livestock out of their own pocket. On top of that, there were strict penalties of 0.5% for every single day of delay. They embedded hard-coded ethics and anti-corruption clauses and guaranteed donor audit rights and whistleblower access. They essentially built an administrative fortress around this whole transaction.
And finally, let's look at the results in Section 4, Value for Money Achieved.
So the team successfully secured the lowest compliant bid, with the main contract at $32,125. But concurrently, they legally defined exactly what their emergency backup option would cost, establishing a firm ceiling of $34,145.
Now, the crucial difference between those two numbers is exactly $2,020. By preemptively negotiating that backup contract, they literally capped their operational risk at just over $2,000. That represents roughly a 6% premium over the main contract. Look, in the corporate world, paying a 6% premium to guarantee an entire fragile supply chain against total failure, that is an absolute masterclass in cost avoidance. If the main supplier totally dropped the ball, they wouldn't have to scramble, delay the project by months, or pay exorbitant price-gouged emergency procurement costs later. They knew exactly what the fallback would cost, and they had it legally locked in.
Ultimately, this operation really stands out because of 4 incredible pillars of success. They achieved real cost savings through competitive, lowest compliant bidding. They achieved immense cost avoidance through that pre-agreed backup framework. They directly engaged and enriched the local markets in Nangere and Potiskum, making sure aid money circulated locally. And they maintained a fully auditable, transparent process for their institutional donors. I think this explainer really proves that disciplined procurement is so much more than just pushing administrative paperwork. It is the vital, driving strategy behind safe, ethical, and highly effective humanitarian impact.
So as you look at your own organization's operations, whether you're in humanitarian aid, business, or anything else really, ask yourself, are your administrative processes just annoying red tape you have to jump over, or are they strategic safety nets actively protecting your mission's ultimate success? The 750 goats of Yobe State completely prove that great procurement is great strategy. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.